Um, so I guess we'll get started in a somewhat relaxed way here and keep it conversational. Marc, I'll get you to kick us off here. I would love to kind of have you introduce yourself. Perhaps kind of where in the world are you based? What are you up to these days? And how did you come across the DevLake community?
Hi, Maxim. Sure. Well, I'm based in Canada, Montreal, Quebec, and I work for a telco company, and I've worked in large and small companies along my career, and in different positions. Worked at software developers, testers, integration support type of work. So I touched a little bit on everything. And right now I'm looking at improving the ways of working of different software development team. And I was looking at a way to display the data. It's a little bit what Kevin was talking about, which, by the way, was very interesting. I think I could relate to some of the problems and things that he was talking about. So I was looking at, I came across DevLake when I was looking for a tool to display metrics, right? A dashboard that would tell us everything we need to know. Radiator also. And I've worked with different tools. I've worked with tools that are fully integrated, that does everything and display the information that I needed, but also very simple tool where, made in-house, where we could just push our information and display only what we wanted. So I touched a little bit of both. And what seems interesting with DevLake is, to me, it looks like it's a tool that sits a little bit in between. So it's simple enough, but yet also very powerful. It gets the data that you need. It's flexible enough so that we can perhaps create some hooks so that we can provide even more information. So that's where I'm at today with DevLake.
It's really awesome. Really appreciate that great intro, Marc. And as always, thanks for being such a great part of the community. And it's so cool. And I say this so sincerely, and I imagine I speak for Hajong and the rest of our team, that are listening to this live and on the recording. Like, it just it's so special to have like these kinds of moments for us, where we, being hard at work and then hearing you kind of repeat back to us in some ways, like, what did we think was going to be useful, and why do we think this thing is worth our time and effort? And then for you to kind of say it out loud is just so magical. So I'm really grateful. Rob, thanks so much for joining us. And thanks again for being ready to boot up here a little bit earlier than scheduled. Appreciate all of you guys for being so flexible with Kevin's schedule here. So, Rob, would love to hear kind of where in the world are you based? What are you?
I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I work for a large company. It's IBM, working in enterprise storage, hybrid cloud storage. My background is recently I've been working a lot in this metric space. I just came over to this project a couple months ago, and when I came over, before then, I spent a lot of time doing metrics for my prior role, especially for Cassandra. And I'm a real numbers geek. I love seeing everything. And so when I came on board, it seemed like a natural fit. Hey, Rob, how about helping us with our numbers, And so I came in and I was presented with a MERN stack. And and some custom metrics that had been done by a co-op and another person that had left the group. And so I asked around, do any of you know MERN? And it's like, no. And so nobody knew it. And I don't have a background in MERN. And I was thinking, gee, I'm wondering if there's something out there that would be perhaps more long-term viable, just kind of the overhead of, having this MERN's specialty and skill on the team just for the sake of building panels seemed maybe a bit much. So I looked around and, I saw some of the older things like Hygeia, which probably you've heard of, which doesn't seem all that active now and maybe has a little bit older architecture. And then, holy cow, there's this new DevLake community. It's so vibrant. Maxime, you do a great job running it. Just my experience in my short time here has been terrific in terms of responsiveness of the community. It does have some gaps, and that was one of the things that is a challenge for us in that we primarily are using Travis. We're kind of we're in IBM, but we're in a little startup mode. And so, we had to throw this together, and Travis starts up really fast. And so, Travis isn't currently supported. So I went ahead and signed up for doing a plugin, but there is a catch there in that IBM is using a really old version of Travis that doesn't have the metrics we want yet. And we're working with the IBM team to update that. And it's not really plugged in, but so my current thought is to wait until it does update, or maybe just go ahead. One last thing is, we have a ton of metrics, Maxime, just a ton, and a lot of things we do. I would say security is maybe a little bit more focused here. And I love the Dora metrics, but if you were to look at our team and say what's a key metric, there's some security metrics that come in there right with Dora in terms of criticality. And so how do we incorporate this into a dashboard that makes sense for our business, right? And I'm playing around with the notion of Prometheus exporters, because there's Prometheus exporters for everything, right? And you can get a Prometheus exporter, and Grafana consumes Prometheus really well. So is there some kind of hybrid model where we can take DevLake, which is kind of really nice and kind of, I'll call it a Cadillac, and throw it in there with some, really maybe quickly put together and some Prometheus stuff, and come up with something that we like. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now, Maxime. Thanks.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And thank you, Rob. Really appreciate it. And we'll have to chat about that with, we'll grab us some time with Hejong as well. I want to say yes to everything, but I know Hejong is the one that's going to be up late at night if I do. So I gotta keep it balanced there. And while I have James briefly introduce himself, I'll kind of preload my next question for you guys to think on while he answers. Which, Rob, you kind of bring this up really nicely, which is kind of thinking about like what kind of metrics or frameworks do you tend to kind of think about, or have you found your organization finds most useful? Would love to kind of jump into our next phase of the discussion by talking a little bit about some metrics that you've found personally interesting or useful. James, thanks for jumping on early. It's always good to see you. Quick introductions of where in the world are you today? What are you up to these days? And how did you come across DevLake? If I know these answers, but we'll share them with the community here.
Rad. Yeah, thanks for having me, Maxim. So good to be on a panel with distinguished professionals. I'm based out of Boston. I'm with Red Hat in the open source program office. So my role is as a data scientist. I work as a software engineer right now, building out our own visualization and analysis application. So in a sense, I'm more of an enthusiastic peer to DevLake rather than, or peer minus. We're not nearly as fleshed out. than a power user. But I came across DevLake when Maxim and I met at ApacheCon. I was giving a talk, and our stack is based on Dash, which is kind of, I hesitate to say a wrapper. It's more like an opinionated extension of Flask that makes it easier to use HTML to a Python only programmer. And Maxim and I got talking about metrics and the value of the 30,000 foot perspective on teams and workflow and community. And my project is very much community focused and open source ecosystem focused. And I'd say that if I'm making a broad generalization, it's like DevLake is this really powerful team or institution workflow tool. And I would like our work maybe sits a little bit further above it, where we're interested in the other side of explainability. Instead of looking at what the teams are doing actively, we're looking at how are the communities moving. But after playing with DevLake and seeing how the multi-container like development application is architected, again, just an enthusiastic, pure minus, and learning a lot from how everything is wired together. The interface or DevLake's use of Dora metrics is exciting. The ability to plug your own visualizations into Grafana and render those is exciting. And having hooks into various issue trackers is really awesome. So bread and butter, it's just an awesome tool that I am very excited to dig deeply into over time. Right now, it's just a little bit of jealousy and excitement.
And we have so many different collaboration opportunities near and far, James, as you and I have talked about. Like, I love, that was something we obviously bonded on, was like this mutual interest in figuring out like how do you more effectively track, measure, and then respond to kind of community level signals to make sure that open source communities are really kind of thriving and staying sustainable, which I think is a challenge that everybody is thinking about all the time in this space. And that perfect timing, Prim. I'm so happy to see your face here. One of my favorite community members. We just wrapped up James's introduction, so I'll pass the microphone to you. Just a quick introduction, Prim, on where in the world are you based? What are you working on these days, and how did you find the DevLake community?
Sure. Thank you, Maxim. I appreciate it to be here with you guys and share this panel by the end of the year. And let's start. My name is Prim, like you said, also known as Optimus Prime. I'm working at Mundi in the cloud engineering team. Well, we need to, I'm sorry, I'm based on Colombia. I'm right now at Bogota. And in Mundi, we have the necessity to, have KPIs because, we on DevOps, we are obsessed really with the performance of the microservices and infrastructure, etc. So what happens when you need to have a dashboard with your KPIs of your team, of the DevOps team, and how is if the engineering productivity is healthy in the company? So our CDO, Juan Christensen, sent us a DevLake tool, and so we started to dive into this, and we are working very quickly. It was a very fast and plug and play tool, so we started to look at it, and that's what we are here.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Prim. And I love all of the energy you brought to the community too, in terms of, you ask great questions in the channels. Like, you're one of our kind of real superheroes, in the sense that I think Hezhong and I figured out, I think you were one of the first people to really like drive forward on Dora in a big way, which is just so cool. Because we're so excited about everything Dora. And correct me guys if I'm wrong, but I believe Marc, Rob, Prim, I think that's something all three of you guys share in common, is kind of an interest in Dora. And I'm curious kind of what what have the kind of conversations been like as far as like how your teams are maybe looking to use that, or kind of what brought you to the Dora framework. Would love to kind of understand like from your vantage point, like what is ultimately the kind of what does Dora look like in practice for you guys, and what are your kind of hopes or goals or concerns about it? Would love to kind of hear what brought you to that, and maybe what the next steps with a framework like that end up looking like.
Sure. Can I start if you want? Dora is like I mentioned before. We on DevOps we are obsessed with performance on side of services and infrastructure. So Dora will give us a lot of easy way to have KPIs for our platform teams, right? So we are looking to find opportunities or the right opportunities where we have to touch inside of our pipelines to unleash the developer experience and unleash how they deliver to the business impact and deliver services in a fast, self-paced way. So with these metrics, we are looking at, and we are looking to, beside the valuable feedback we have from our developers inside the company and from all the teams that are building services and application and developing. So beside that, we need to know how our team is impacting them, how they are using our tooling. And that is very difficult on DevOps to have these metrics because we use a lot of tooling from different vendors, different kind of platforms, and we integrate them, but some of them don't offer building metrics. So sometimes you need to build your own custom metrics, but you don't have the time to do that, or in-house services that provide those metrics and expose that. So we find this tool, we work together with our CTO on this, and we are going to find the right where to touch or delivery work so that they unleash their potential, right? That's our main goal. And also to measure our productivity on our internal side.
That's really awesome. And it's funny, Prim, because I know you weren't able to join the first session we had today with Kevin Goldsmith, but it's really kind of validating in many ways that everything you just said aligns to a lot of what he said. As a veteran leading CTO, is like figuring out how do you kind of map these kind of more abstract Dora metrics and map them to the business outcomes, the success of the product. So it's just really cool to see that you're thinking about it very similarly. And Marc, it looked like you maybe had some thoughts. I saw you unmute yourself. Love to hear your thoughts here.
Yeah, actually, as you said, Kevin summed it up very well. When it comes to data, you can make it say whatever you want. You can, it may look good, it may look bad. And I've gone through these phases over my career where, the first time we had to deal with dashboards, I guess we wanted to show, we have all this data and management is asking, are we doing well? How are we doing? And you take all this data, it's coming from everywhere. And you create all those graphs and tables and matrix, and then you go to a meeting and you say, here's my result, here's my report, and there's hundreds of graphs and hundreds of tables, and they look at all this and you're so proud because you provided all the data you could. But it's overwhelming. Obviously, you can't use that. It's just too much. They need a quick solution. They need a quick view of the situation. And I'm fairly new to Dora. So I'm hoping that Dora is the answer. I was hoping Kevin would say, this is bad and this is good and this is the way to go. I don't think we all have the answer yet. I think it's coming. I think we will find the right metrics in the future eventually that fits your business, of course, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking at Dora now, and I think it makes more sense. I think it's more focused, adapted, I guess, data that we could use. So I'll pursue this and see where it takes us.
Absolutely. No, you bring up a good point, Marc, which I want to make sure to say for everyone listening live as well as on the recording. One of the plans that I have for our community in the new year is to put together some like kind of Dora masterclass kind of workshops. And part of that, right, I think is what Marc acknowledges, which is you can have really studied up on this stuff and there's still some mystery left to it, right? There's still kind of things to figure out in terms of what's really going to work, like what should you focus on, how do you implement it? And that's a series of sessions I'm looking to host in the new year. And hopefully Prim, Rob, Marc, and James will all join me and others from our community where we'll talk about these things. We'll really kind of dig deeper to figure out like what, so you've got your DevLake dashboard, you've got your Dora metrics, you've got other metrics, now what? We're going to go and dive in together on the now what. Rob, I'd love to hear from your perspective.
I'll tell you something this morning that happened. I was on a Scrum call with our team and another Scrum, and our Scrum right now is responsible for spinning up clusters. We're storage, so I mean you're spinning up clusters out in various clouds because we're hybrid cloud. And since it's hybrid cloud, this is not what we call blue dollars. This is real money. And you know how management is with money. So we control those costs very tightly. And these guys are saying, look, we need to be able to do this ourselves. You guys are too slow. You're in the way, right? And management is really struggling with how do they keep a handle on costs and yet allow these developers to do their job where, you know, when they need to spin something up, you let them spin it up. It'd be one thing if it was on our own cloud, but you know, we're talking about like real outflowing cash. So yeah, there's another metric. How do you do that? And you know, there's open source out there like Koku that does it, but how do we incorporate that with this, or do we even try? I mean, it's just a real challenging problem. You know, the old capital equipment model is dead, right? With the cloud. Everything we rent by the hour, and you can't let your developers just wait for you to grant permission, but management won't. So that's a real challenge for us, is cost management. You know, hey, I you know need to think about it some more, but you know maybe there's something there that we can do too. But you know, the environment is always getting more complicated. There's more that we have to do. It used to be I could care less about cost. When I was a junior engineer, right, I could care less. I mean, that was manager stuff, right? Well, now I care, right? So you have more and more things that seem like with Agile and with the new FinOps process and all that, where it's back on you. And so it's almost like you as a developer need to be an expert in money. You need to be an expert in performance. You need to be an expert in CI/CD, all these different things. And you need to be educated. You know, I loved the presentation before, and there is concern about how much is this stuff being used by management and senior management, but it really comes down to me. You know, we've got these people on the team. These metrics are for the individual to help them do what is a very complicated job, right? And all the different aspects of their job and doing it right. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Yeah, there's just some really good thoughts there, Rob, and I think really kind of highlights the importance of, you know, everything we're discussing, right? Which is, you know, what behaviors are you incentivizing based off of what you're focused on? How are you maybe kind of establishing a more kind of objective or shared kind of set of vocabularies and metrics that can make conversations, you know, more clear and more objective? I think that's certainly one of the roles that it plays. And I also kind of like what you allude to, which of course echoes also of the discussion, which is the importance of that kind of context and being able to translate those metrics based off of that context into the outcomes that you're seeking. Those are really good answers. And I'm curious, guys, I feel like you've probably all kind of been around the block a little bit in terms of looking at different metrics, or maybe having experienced, different metrics. I'm wondering if any of you have kind of, examples of your own where you feel like you've seen kind of analytics or metrics, either kind of misused or kind of done in a way that maybe didn't yield the impact that, you were hoping to see. I always like to, look into, where can metrics kind of go wrong, or maybe where can they fall short? Because I think ultimately that's one of the big goals we have for DevLake, of course, with Dora, is figuring out like, how do you make them as useful as you can possibly make them, and make sure they're empowering things versus, creating more issues.
Oh yeah, I mean, so I'm a real, you're asking the right guy. I'm just a real numbers geek guy. So I'll just give you a real quick scenario. You've got a Kafka queue, and you're feeding a database, and there's a problem, a critical problem. And you go and look, and Kafka's fine now, and the database is just struggling. And what you find is, everybody's pointing at the database saying this database has a problem. But the real problem was when we figured it out, and the numbers say it, right? Oh, the database is struggling. But what really happened is, way back some hours ago, Kafka had been backed up for some days, and now the floodgate had been opened up, right? So really, the point is not to say that the numbers are lying, but it's difficult by looking at, you can use a number and you can just make totally the wrong story, and it looks to high-level management and to others, it looks really obvious. Well, go fix it. I mean, it's obvious it's your problem, and it's not. So, getting the right metrics and getting the right numbers is so critical, and being able to actually understand the real story. And, I think that's something that's to be said for Dora, is it's kind of cross-domain. The cross-domain nature of it makes it quite robust.
It's a really great point. I love that you mentioned the kind of cross-domain aspect of it, that it's not just isolating engineering into its own little vacuum, right? It's looking at things in a bigger context. It's so important. Marc, I see you there. Love your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, just a quick example of how it can go bad. I was working for a startup, and we had set up a big TV and a radiator, and we would push the data onto the radiator, and that was for the first time. So everything was, going according to plan for the CEO, and everything was fine. And then one day we started pushing data related to testing and quality of the product. And of course, maybe we were pushing too much data, or real data, test failures, and so on. And to us, developers and testers, it made sense, and that was just fine. That was a reflection of the product at the time, and it was fine. So the CEO passed by, looked at the screen, and went back to his desk, called all his managers, and started giving them a hard time because the board looked bad. It looked like the product was bad. It was all red across the board. And in fact, it was exactly the way it was before when he was happy. But now all of a sudden, the data was in his face. And but it was just the same situation. So we got word to modify the dashboard so that it would actually look the way he wanted to see it, in a way. So we put a little bit more green. It was real data. It was just manipulated, massaged in a way so that it would look like he wanted to see it. So that goes back to that point I said at the beginning, and I think what Kevin was saying is you can make data look good, bad. So that was my experience, and it's unfortunate because you want to do the right thing. And
exactly, yeah, you bring up a really good point there, which I think is a common thread through almost everything that we have seen in the DevLake community, which is, we've spoken with so many different CTOs and engineering leaders who are looking to really just figure out, like, how do we more effectively and consistently and accurately communicate with our non-technical peers, right? Especially like non-technical executives, being able to put something together that doesn't require a ton of explanation, is difficult for them to misuse, is difficult to get misinterpreted, and doesn't kind of get the wrong gears in motion. Because the point you bring up there, Marc, I think is a really important and poignant one, which is, that's where metrics can go badly wrong, right? Is you can have a system, you can have a product, you can have a team that's performing, and then if you have data that maybe can get misinterpreted or maybe panic, an executive or a leader or a manager who maybe doesn't understand everything that they're seeing, or they don't understand the context of it, or maybe they just react to it in a way that doesn't necessarily make sense, it can create far more issues than it can solve. And I think that's really an important point. I'd love to segue into our next question. And this is a very kind of a DevLake specific one for you guys. Would love to hear from you. What's your kind of favorite part of DevLake? And maybe what's something you'd like to see in the future? Give you guys a second to think about it, of course, but would love to kind of hear, what was maybe something that you saw in DevLake that was kind of your magic moment where you're like, aha, this thing is actually what I'm looking for, or it's really helpful or really useful. And what's something that's maybe frustrated you, or a limitation that you'd like to see? Prim, I see you nodding your head there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We were playing a lot with DevLake during the last quarter. So, what we love from so far from DevLake is that, like Rob mentioned, the cross-domain thing is that you break the silos between the tooling, and you can have right away metrics and KPIs from there, like Dora. We love that for sure. And aside Dora, we have engineering productivity and metrics. So that's is a whole landscape, right? We can have a landscape from what's going on the healthiness of a good engineering productivity workflows. And what we think we're missing is right now is that, it's very manual to match teams from GitHub to the dashboard. So maybe if this is automated, it will make our life more easier. And right now we are struggling with that, and that will give us a lot of visibility and observability, because they are tied to the dashboard of engineering productivity cycled by team. And that will bring us another point of view, right? Because like I mentioned before, we have a lot of feedback from our developers teams, but that's a human aspect, and nothing can replace data if it's for sure accurately, right? So we have accurately metrics from that, and we can start to analyze where we can push or work to unleash the developer potential.
Love that. I'll call on Rob if you're up for it. What are your kind of thoughts that come to mind for this?
Okay, so I like the fact that the community. I really like the DevLake community. I think it's awesome. The other thing is, I'm a fan of the object model and of the strategic choice to use Grafana. I think that was a critical choice to make this tool what it needs to be ultimately. Opening it up to everything else that Grafana can do in terms of, you can aggregate with Grafana, you can integrate other things. Grafana can graph so many different things. And so, those two things. And then the last thing is the plugin. So anyways, again, I think it has a lot going for it. Those three things right there are really the three critical ones.
Awesome. I love to hear that specificity too. Grafana obviously has its limitations, and we don't always love it, but it's an undeniably solid product as well. Pass the mic to you there, James.
Yeah, I would just like to speak on that point, which is Maxim and I have discussed different dashboarding and visualization stacks before. And in a sit down we had a little while ago, we talked about the idea of minimum viable engineering footprint, like what you need to have to get the ball rolling and to get things moving quickly. And what I really like is the use of Grafana and the ability to create your own visualizations and dashboards with SQL from the data that was pulled. I think that's a really, really user-friendly and extendable way to do dashboards, where your bread and butter of the product is the way you collect and aggregate data. That's awesome. But then making it super customizable is a challenge if you want to develop your own stack, and Grafana just takes care of that immediately using easily learned tools without a ton of engineering overhead and headache. What we're doing on our team is using Dash, which is like building a web app, which is awesome, and we love its customizability. But if we were to choose something else that didn't fit the very specific niche we're doing, where we need plug and play with Python all the way down, we would be using Grafana as well. And it plugs in really nicely as a multi-container development application to use as a community member, which is really nice. That's one of my favorite things. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really well said, James. And I think talks nicely to, this bigger picture idea, right? That there's not always going to be a right tool for absolutely every single thing. And as you point out, like your need for that kind of tech stack alignment, drives a lot of that decision making. And I loved everything that I saw you guys doing too. So it's there's definitely so many cool ways to do this stuff. Marc, if you're up for it, I'll pass to you next. Would love to kind of hear from you what you've liked so far, and if there's anything that you've come across in DevLake so far that you'd maybe like to see in the future, or a frustration you've run into that we need to think about to repair or fix. Promise you won't hurt our feelings.
Well, I'm fairly new to DevLake compared to the other users here. The experience was good so far. I think they touched on the fact that it runs on top of Grafana or along with Grafana, so that shows a lot of possibilities. So that's great. Some of the problems we were having, and that's probably related to the environment that I'm working in right now, is it's a very secured environment, maybe overly secured. Maybe there's no such thing as overly secured, a security guy would say. But we've been struggling a little bit with the deployment internally in regards to the certificates, firewalls, and so on. So far, I was able to find some workarounds. So I'm still working on that. So I don't know if it's something that DevLake community can fix, or is it something that I have to address in my own environment. But these are the challenges so far.
Yeah, no, I know that's been something we've been collaborating with you on, and it's been interesting for me to kind of watch us figure it out together. And I think that's certainly the magic of these kind of community driven things, right? It's so fun to collaborate with all of you guys. And I think if I were to capture like the essence of like what makes an open source project so powerful and so exciting, right? It's that we're in that kind of like real time feedback and development and debugging loop, right? Where there's no kind of silos there, right? Where we're able to really have like a direct dialogue. Like it's so exciting, you know, when we're chatting with Prim, figuring out like, okay, how do we get those Dora metrics actually working? You know, if we're working with Marc and figuring out like how do we address some of these kind of security and access challenges to actually make DevLake talk to the things it needs to talk to. Like I love seeing all of that happen, even if for me, you know, as someone who's not necessarily working on the code, you know, I don't understand all of it, but I understand enough, and it's just so incredibly exciting to watch. So really appreciate how active you guys have been. I know we're at kind of the end of our scheduled time, and I want to honor everybody's schedules. And afterwards, we'll leave this open for a minute to have some open Q&A, and I'm going to bring Hajong up because I know he wanted to say a thank you and hello to all of you guys. But I would love to kind of give you guys kind of one kind of parting question, and perhaps it's a kind of piece of advice or a tip or something that you could share with the community. Would love your guys' thoughts on, you know, if there's one tip that you would give to someone who's maybe getting started with something like DevLake, maybe looking to get started with Dora. Like what are the things you think that they should be thinking about when they begin their metrics journey in engineering, and what are the kind of mistakes that you would want them to avoid that maybe you've made in the past, or things that you've got right that you'd want to see? I'll kick it off with James here because I see his hand raised, but would love if you guys could all share, you know, a thought or advice of some kind on, you know, how do you succeed with this stuff?
I want to make a global recommendation that comes from having failed multiple times with data science stuff, which is believe or worry the most about how whatever you do will be read and interpreted. When we create these metrics and figures, we almost certainly create what people come to believe is an oracle observation. There's this predisposition of people consuming data, myself included, to trust that the analysis is correct and to extrapolate sometimes grossly from that analysis. And what I wrote down to a previous question was, sometimes you can point users in the wrong direction by shortcutting intuition and shortcutting due diligence. And maybe this won't apply to everyone, but when you're creating these visualizations using tools like DevLake, using tools like Tableau, I just think it's important to keep in mind that if you think about a non-technical end user, it's important to be able to distill the utility of the visualization or the analysis into its proper context. That maybe you recommend they do their own due diligence past what you show them. If you're making a figure that generalizes something, it's important to be able to report that they should also confirm it and confirm the intuition that you present. That would be my generic thing that I say in any opportunity I can, because it's so incredibly important to be transparent about the non-oracle nature of data science stuff. Thank you.
Great thoughts, James. I'll pass the mic next. Who wants to jump in next? There we go. I'll pass the mic to Prim here.
Sure. I agree with some of the James statements. Was really accurate on that, and also I want to recommend that don't look only internals of a cloud engineering team, of a DevOps team. There is a lot of context on the teams out there in the other that engage with your platform, and there is a lot of context there. So that's where the engineering productivity metrics enter to play again, and where you can spot a lot of other things that are outside the tooling, and that you can take a look over there and you know put together the right culture, the right fixes that you need, so that you can, let's say, evangelize the DevOps culture in other teams, because this is cross, right? It's cross-wide organization, and it's not like James said, it's not only technical. You need to, spread the word on the organization, that so that they can believe that this is consistent data, that you can leverage things with this and put the ball rolling, right? So thank you.
Those are great thoughts, Prim. Thanks so much. Rob, I'll pass the mic to you, and I think we still have Marc too, if you're still there.
Sure. So I'll just say this, is spend the time you need to within your organization to help get the right message out. There's a lot of metrics. There's a lot of viewpoints, right? And I think it's important to make sure that the metrics aren't the end. The end is the conversations you have with the metrics. That's the real answer, right? So don't quit when you have the metrics and you're passing them over the wall. Have the conversations, and it's not all just about telling people. It's about listening to them. What does this mean? And making sure that you make them maximize the value of what you've collected. That's what I'll say. Thanks.
I love that. Yeah, really well said. And Marc, if you're up for it, we'll have you give us the final closing statement here.
It's a big responsibility, but I think I don't really have anything else to add. I think the others summed it up pretty well.
Awesome. Well, I know, Hajong, I'll pass the mic to you briefly, because I know you wanted to say a proper hello and thank you. And then before we formally close up, I want to do something that maybe is a little silly, but I think will be a lot of fun. We'll all kind of do a silly pose or a smile or something. And Joshua, one of our developer evangelists and our community leaders, is going to take a couple of good screenshots of us all to kind of commemorate the occasion. But I'll pass the mic briefly to you, Hajong.
Thank you, Maxim. Thank you. I just want to come up and then say hi and really thank you everyone for joining us today. For many of our panelists, we've been chatting, debugging, and working together in Slack for a couple of months now. And this is really the first time for me to see all of you, in person, and also get your feedback and perspective on DevLake. So I'm really excited and grateful for that. And DevLake now is 1 year old. I'm really looking forward to building this, with Maxim and with all of you together in the coming year, and make a really useful and valuable tool for the developers. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. And passing the mic back to Maxim.
All right. Well, to kind of summarize, a few takeaways for everyone still here alive, and then for those listening to the recording. Join the DevLake Slack if you aren't already in it. Make sure to introduce yourselves. I think we're very welcoming, very active. If there's a problem you're looking to solve, we have so many fantastic people that will help you out. That's the first point of order. The next is to stay tuned. Stay tuned on Twitter, on Slack, everywhere else. In the new year, I'm going to be getting some rest. Hajong's going to be getting some rest over the Christmas holidays, but in the new year, we're going to come back stronger than ever. And one thing I'm very excited about is to host some of these kind of Dora and metrics round tables. Like, we're going to dive deep as a team, as a community. No one has all the answers, right? We like to think we're experts, but even if we are, we still have so much to learn, so much to figure out. And that's where the power of community comes in. And that's what we'll be doing in the new year. So you won't want to miss out on those things. Make sure to join. I think the key takeaways today, there's so many. We'll be working to put them into a blog and to share them with you guys so it's as actionable and memorable as possible. But some high-level things that I think are so important, right? First, to kind of give DevLake a appropriate kind of kiss on the forehead. I think the magic of DevLake, right, is it is very transparent. It is very flexible. It is very customizable. We can extend it and touch so many different tools. And I think that is part of the magic of creating something that answers all of these challenges and that breaks down these barriers between teams and makes this as actionable as possible. So we're going to keep doing that. And with your guys' help, we're going to keep making it better and keep making it more accessible for anyone in the world to get started with. And then I think the other key thing that I certainly woke away from today is a good reminder, right? Which is to think about like what behaviors are you really incentivizing with those metrics? Like what are you motivating? What kind of organizational level things are you kind of catalyzing by introducing these things? And are they the right things? And then most importantly, right, is the role of all of you guys as people leading the charge on these things, which is context, context, context. It's figuring out how are you having the right conversations? How are you interpreting that information in the smartest, most effective way? And then most importantly, being a leader that can take that and then bring it to other teams, bring it to managers, align that vocabulary, make sure that those metrics are being used for good and not evil. Because in the wise words of Peter Parker, right, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think if we're succeeding in our mission with DevLake, we're bringing great power. And now it's you guys' job as the community to have the great responsibility. So we'll finish up. Joshua, I know, is sitting there on his keyboard ready for some screenshots. If you guys want to do a quick smile or silly pose, and we'll count to 3, we'll grab a fun screenshot. And then with that, we'll close this out. And guys, I am so unbelievably grateful. This is one of my favorite moments of the year here, getting together all on a panel to chat about this. It's truly magic. And I know it means the world to Hezhong, means the world to me, means the world to our community. And I cannot wait for the next one. So with that, I'll count down from 3. We'll do a silly pose. Joshua will grab a screenshot and we will get into our days, everybody. All right. 3, 2, 1. Love it. Guys, thank you so much. Hezhong and I will stick around on the Zoom for a couple of minutes in case anyone wants to, raise their hand, wants to chat. But